Please. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have now the big opportunity to have a high-level dialogue and first a speech of the Vice President of European Commission. As we have seen, one of the results, debate is not so much in favor for people just solving migration problems. And I think we all are aware of so many talking the talk about what should be done in all the migration areas we are discussing every day. But if you ask the question, who is walking the walk to all the different countries of origin, to all those who are partners of European Union, there is one answer. This is the Vice President of European Commission, Margaritis Schinas. And we thank you very much, Mr. Vice President, being with us. I think you are in between different journeys. You are coming from Senegal and Cote d'Ivoire and Gambia and going to Mauritania. But we are happy that you are today in Vienna to address us. Please, Mr. Vice President, you have the floor. Great pleasure.
Dear friends, dear Director General, dear Michael, it's a great pleasure to be back in Vienna at the now notorious Vienna Migration Days. Let me congratulate you once more, Michael, for your ability to bring all the key players into a room, a magnificent room like this, for an event that continues to drive the discussion on migration matters in Europe. I also take this opportunity to extend a particular welcome to my colleagues from Sweden and Greece, Maria and Dimitri. Thank you for your great work. Thank you for bringing in the sensitivity of two very specific situations, one from the country of reception, one from the country of the first line. And also thank you for being sober, pragmatic, realistic European voices in a public debate that in your respective countries very often becomes toxic. Thank you for that. So we all know that each time October rolls round, Vienna waits for you. This is the VMC moment. And it's a particular honor that I have been upgraded to a keynote speaker. Last time I was merely a dinner speaker. Dear friends, the thread of migration is deeply woven into Europe's history. And yet, whilst this issue is not new, our ability to coherently and collectively respond to it as Europeans is not given. You could fill a library with the doomsday newspaper headlines, articles, op-eds, parliamentary debates that depict migration as the stumbling block upon which the European Union continues to fail. But for some time now, recently, we are starting to rewrite that script. It has not been a straightforward journey, but it's happening. Today, we have good reason to be hopeful. For the first time, after decades of toxicity and failure, Europe is reaching a historic, unprecedented agreement on our Pact for Migration and Asylum. An approach which is aiming at tackling all facets of this multi-dimensional, challenging topic. But above all, a system that is firmly grounded on what Europe represents today in a turbulent, unsecure world. It is grounded on our values, on the model of society we stand for, on protecting our borders and on saving lives. But this was not given 4 years ago. The Director General took us down the memory lane 30 years ago. Let me refresh your memory of where we started at the start of this commission just 4 years ago. Try to think back to 2019. Moria. The images that traveled around the world, the shame of Moria disgracing the entirety of Europe, brandished by those who wish to see Europe fail as the tangible and damning proof that migration is Europe's Achilles heel. 2019, Frontex was still in an embryonic stage compared to the needs at hand, only then starting to put together the resources needed to become a fully fledged European border and coast guard. And with the wounds of the 2015-2016 crisis still very present, Europe, our union, was divided. Brickering and division was the name of the game. Countries at that time, our member states at the external border, rightly were complaining of a Europe that left them with the obligation to shoulder disproportionate responsibilities. And countries further inward in our union also justifiably felt pressured by arrivals that they had little control over. This was the story 4 years ago. In the years since, we have undoubtedly and unfortunately witnessed a long series of migration crises. I would call them a migration polycrisis. First Moria, then Evros, then the Belarusian instrumentalization, then Lampedusa, then Canary Islands, Ceuta, Calais. All those crises we witnessed were not the cause, but the symptoms of a problem. They were not the root causes of what troubles us, but were the atmospheric or the thermometer, if you like, of the overall situation. The real issue, the root cause of all our troubles, was the lack of a common, genuine European approach to migration and asylum. One which is premised on the simple notion of protecting our borders, maintaining Europe's position as an asylum destination for those in need, working with countries of origin and transit, organizing returns for those who do not merit asylum protection, and demonstrating solidarity and burden sharing among all members of the family. This was not rocket science. This is pure logic. And that's the mere logic on which we built our pact proposals. All the while, we have been playing these architects of the new regulatory system, but at the same time, we were forced to continue working as firefighters, running from crisis to crisis, from incident to incident, addressing every new challenge as it arose. And you will indulge me if I'd like to pause a moment on that statement. As Europeans, and this is particular a Brussels pathology, we are generally and very often seduced by what I would like to call the intellectual appeal of pessimism. That it's somehow trendy to be pessimistic. You get more invitations, more interviews requests, But once in a while, it is also good to recall the successes, to defend what we jointly managed to obtain as Europeans. And in these years, we have very good reasons to be collectively proud for the many successes that we obtained parallel to our architect work with the Pact. From the ashes of the fire in Moria, we were able to build in 4 years, not 1, but 5 state-of-the-art reception and identification centers on the Greek islands, built according to our EU values and procedures, that are now serving as precursors of the new European standard of reception. In the face of the most brutal, cruel, hybrid state-sponsored attack by the Belarusian dictator that left thousands, families, stranded in an ice-cold forest, we learned the power of migration diplomacy and have seen how effective Europe was in activating a diverse range of tools, from transport to trade policy, that secured the results we wanted in record time. And of course, confronted with Russia's war against Ukraine, many expected the Union to crumble. Well, it didn't happen like that. We were able to activate for the first time in community history an instrument that was long forgotten, designed for the likelihood of a mass exodus from the Yugoslavia war that never materialized, the temporary protection status, which is not a perfect instrument, but it allowed us to give blanket protection and the whole of society approach to the million of Ukrainian refugees that fled their homes to seek our protection. And we were able to welcome them and to integrate them in our job markets, in our education and health systems. These 4 years of architects of construction work and firefighting also taught us some important lessons that I'm sure that you will be discussing today and tomorrow. The main of which is that we can climb mountains when we work as Team Europe, as one united, inexorable force. We have started to enact a change of paradigm, a paradigm shift in the way we engage with third countries, looking at the broad range of leverages available to the European Union, and perhaps most importantly, for the first time, not being afraid or ashamed to use them. We have learned that migration does not stop or start at our borders, and we have therefore opted for a whole-of-route approach of managing migration, with the Commission presenting a series of dedicated action plans designed around the specificities of each migratory route. In July, we signed a memorandum of understanding with Tunisia, the top country of departure towards the EU this year. This MOU focuses on 5 pillars for a strategic and comprehensive partnership. We are not asking them to do things for us. We agree with them to work together on a holistic win-win partnership agreement that covers economic development, strengthening investment and trade, green energy transition, migration, and people-to-people contacts. This is the way we opted to work, also supporting this agreement with 105 million funding for this year. We have also learned the value of visa policy as a crucial element for migration policy. And when numbers started to rise along the Western Balkan route, causing a direct impact to Austria, we acted immediately to ensure great visa alignment from our partners in the Western Balkans that I see represented today. We decreased, through these coordinated efforts, the migratory pressure along the Western Balkans route significantly this year compared to 22. The learning curve was admittedly steep, but even just over the last 4 years, we have taken strong measures in our capacity to manage better. Now, looking forward, you are probably Europe's best experts on migration policy, and I would never like to spin you with an idea that all our problems are over and somehow there was a solutions button that we pushed and everything will be different. But we are getting there. We are getting there for the first time after many years of failure. And let us now, in this second part of my remarks, try to share with you the way we feel this new regulatory framework will work in the future. How will the future of migration policy develop on the basis of what we managed to achieve under this current political cycle? And I will start with the elephant in the room, which is the external dimension of migration policy. Europe will never be able to manage internally unless we are able to manage externally. It's as simple as that. We have several examples, some of them I mentioned, of how coordinated and stepped up engagement has worked in these recent years from Belarus to the Western Balkans. But we are now shifting our attention to Western Africa, because Western Africa nationalities were amongst of the top arrivals in the recent Lampedusa crisis. As the Director General rightly said, I'm now in the middle of West Africa tour. I was 10 days ago in the Ivory Coast, Guinea, Conakry, and Senegal, and tomorrow I will visit Mauritania, and next Monday, Gambia. The method we're following in discussions with our African partners is tried and tested. For me, there is no alternative to the Team Europe approach that combines everything that Europe can mobilize and look in search of these partnership agreements. One of the impressions I got from these field trips, other than that commissioners should leave their offices very often and feel the situation on the ground, which is much more pedagogical than the Berlaymont canteen. What I found from these contacts with my interlocutors is that they listen. And they are very receptive to what we have to say if we are straightforward and specific and clear on what we ask them to do, what they can do to help us, and what we can do for them if they help us. I omit a part of this equation is what we will not do for them if they do not help us. But that's the deal. And it works. We found receptive ears at the political level on the need both to accept returns and readmission for the many of their citizens that are stranded and not likely to obtain asylum protection. They insist, and they rightly do so, on the need for proper identification, which is a challenge for our member states and for our agencies, but I think we can cope. But it is working. Then I discussed Tunisia, but we are also stepping up now in this same area of cooperation with partners, with Egypt. We will work with Egypt in the same vein, and after this weekend's events, even the need to engage with Egypt is even more pressing. And we have started positively, constructively, to engage with Turkey on renewing or refreshing, we can choose the word we like, our partnership arrangements that date back to 2016. And I salute Attila's presence here with the very important messages that he shared with us earlier. Dear friends, all this, the external dimension of migration policy as we lived it and as we practiced it in the last 4 years, points also out to another conclusion that is not often discussed in Brussels, but I somehow feel tempted to share with you in Vienna. Namely, that the age of Europe's innocence and naivety on these matters is over for good. Migration policy cannot be exclusively the remit of regulatory efforts. It's not done through office work and regulation. It requires a much more complex, multifaceted, engaging world with partners. And in engaging with partners, we have to be crystal clear along the lines I described. It is now time to switch to a new model, start setting the tone for migration management worldwide, starting from Europe, exporting a method that can be helpful to others. The post-Cotonou framework agreement is a very strong start in this sense, but ultimately what we need is to build an international coalition against migrant smuggling and trafficking. This is not only a European issue, it's a bigger issue that has to concern all our partners beyond Europe. And as you all know, announced by Ursula von der Leyen, we will very shortly this autumn host an international conference on the fight against smuggling, where we must seize precisely the opportunity to engage our partners worldwide, not only Europe, on how we better do this. Okay, what comes after the external dimension? Well, another key feature for the future of migration policy in Europe, it's what we would call a diverse toolbox of instruments. I'm thinking of a number of regulatory improvements beyond the pact that can still help us in having this meaningful migration content, policy content I'm looking for. The rules we have, for example, on smuggling, we call them the facilitators package. They provide a definition of the offense of smuggling as, I quote, facilitation of entry, transit and residence, unquote. They do provide for sub-criminal offense and sanctions, but perhaps it is now the time to go beyond that and take a fresh look on how we can even tighten even further this definition. We will do that to reflect the increasing pressure of the business model of trafficking against us. Another area would be to revise the proposal for the visa suspension mechanism. You all know that the main purpose of this mechanism that we enacted already in 2017 was to enable a temporary suspension of the visa exception in case of a substantial increase in irregular migration. But sorry to break the news, it didn't work. For reasons that it's not probably the moment to discuss, the only case in which we were able to trigger in practice this facility was for Vanuatu. With all my respects to Vanuatu, I don't think that this is the core of what our visa suspension mechanism should be all about. So we need to revise that as well. And we need to lower the threshold for activating the mechanism and use it as part of our toolbox together with the rest. You will also remember, because you are migration experts, that at the heat of the Belarus hybrid war, we announced a set of measures against transport operators, airlines, and not only, cooperating or suspected to cooperate with smuggling and irregular migration. Sorry again to break the news, it's still somewhere on the cancels table. Not enacted, still there, to remind us of what could have been yet another element in our toolbox. So, the conclusion on this toolbox idea is that we need a varied tool, a varied toolbox of instruments. Not one, not two, all of them. And it won't come as a surprise when I tell you that this also comes with a cost. All this has a money tag attached to it. Why? First of all, because the new pact will create a new reality with a different set of controls at the external borders that needs to be financed properly. And secondly, because the external dimension of migration policy, our relations with the countries of origin and transit, would also require money. And that's why we have proposed in the midterm review of our multi-annual financial framework to add an additional 2 billion euros for migration and border management. Yesterday, I had the chance to meet 4 prime ministers, 3 of them united in Bulgaria, the Bulgarian, the Romanian, and Greek prime minister, and later yesterday night, the Austrian chancellor. I praised the Godspell for the 2 billion euros. I'm grateful if you would join me to repercute this argument that we will need additional funding to make all this work. But in this toolbox, money will be an important part, but not the only one. All the rest would have to come with it. A final word on something which is at the same time easy, undisputed, needed, universally needed, north, south, east, west, but at the same time very difficult politically. And it's called legal migration. Everywhere I go, Susanna Raab just said it a few minutes ago, said we need more people. We need more people for our healthcare, for our agriculture, for tourism, for you name it. We need more people. We are plagued by labor shortages, significant labor shortages. Just a number, last year, the employment rate in the European Union reached a new record high, one of the highest, almost nearing full employment. And yet, on that year, 74% of small and medium enterprises in Europe report that they face a lack of skilled workers. That's the story. There is no more need to spend words on the diagnostics part of what we need to do. So we need to move into some system of organized labor mobility. We have declared this year as the European Year of Skills. That's okay. We have unprecedented money for professional training through the Recovery and Resilience Funds and through our normal EU budget. That's also okay, but that's not enough. Given our dramatic demographic situation, we need to organize this system for legal migration and organized labor mobility now. So we have already started to put in place the few elements of this puzzle. with revised rules on the so-called EU blue card for high-skill individuals from third countries, the proposal to revise the single permit and the long-term residence directives, which facilitate intra-EU mobility. We have started to launch the so-called talent partnerships, aiming to strengthen cooperation between the EU member states and partners. And now, in mid-November, in a few weeks, together with Commissioner Johansson and my employment colleague Nico Schmidt, we'll present a further set of proposals on the talent mobility. This, we haven't found yet a better name. The central piece of this puzzle, of the package, would be the EU talent pool. This will be a system, a platform, that will allow third country nationals, especially from the countries of origin that we need to stabilize in Africa, to apply for job vacancies in the European Union in areas and sectors that we have identified with the cooperation of our European Employers Federation. And through this match, we will try to reduce at the same time the irregular migration, plug key gaps in our labor markets, and create political and economic stability in our relations with third countries. Everybody will stand to gain from this package, but at the same time, I know that this package will be violently attacked by the populists and Europhobes left and right, that they will immediately jump on the argument that Europe is opening up the gates. We are not. We are opening a door so that people stop jumping from the window. Ladies and gentlemen, this is how I see things at this crucial moment. Try to refresh your memory on how we started, where we are, and how this will work together. It's not easy, but I remain convinced, and I said this in the European Parliament last week, that the largest, the biggest incentive for irregular migration and the main facilitator, the pull factor for the smuggling operations, is the lack of the European migration and asylum system. This leaves cracks in our system, loopholes that the smugglers are very able to exploit. We are now building this new framework. Over the last 3 years has been a very complex negotiating endeavor. Dimitris has joined us very recently in the last phase, but Maria knows what we went through in negotiating this, and she personally, under the Swedish presidency, was instrumental in producing the first breakthrough that took us so close to what I see as a historic moment. We are now so close, but at the same time, not yet there. So in the few months until the European election, we will continue to work on building this agreement, which I would personally have preferred to be a unanimous agreement. It is not the case. There are 2 member states that are not willing to agree. So the founding fathers hopefully gave us the opportunity to discuss and decide with qualified majority on migration, but I still hope that until the European elections, we will be able to have everybody on board. Thank you again for having me, and looking forward to continue working with you.
Thank you very much, Vice President. Thank you so much, Vice President. I think this was a very thought-provoking speech. We have got a very good overview about what is ongoing, and we have now the opportunity just to discuss some issues. I would like to start, you have been mentioning last year when you have been to the Vienna Migration Conference, it was a trip to the Western Balkan states. 2 years ago, you have been traveling to the Middle East because of this weaponization of migrants in Belarus. And now you are on your tour on West Africa. So is there anything what you see now that is in common an issue where we should change a little bit our policy, or is this just what is happening and immediate reaction? What do you think about this, Vice President?
Well, looking back at the current political cycle of work we did since December 2019, I think that when this political cycle comes to completion, the legacy that we will leave behind would be, of course, the pact. But next to it will be also this awareness on the need to combine many instruments in the EU toolbox to make a difference with the countries of origin and transit. This is simple, it's pure logic. In a way, it is surprising that it didn't happen before. We can discuss why it didn't happen before. Well, it didn't because, you know, the European Union is also a mirror that reflects agreement and arrangements that have been done in different political institutional settings. And these did not change to the same extent than migration policy. Just to name, to give you an example of what I'm trying to say, the European Union is the biggest, and our member states are the biggest development aid donor in the world. Nobody spends more money on development than we do. And very often, this development aid did not go to the sort of investments that would create better lives to people to stay in their home countries rather than put their lives in the hands of the smugglers. We build highways, ministries, presidential palaces, most of them built by European construction companies. We didn't make an impact to the way people live. And this is what we're trying to do now in Western Africa, Tunisia, and Morocco, tomorrow in Egypt, in Turkey. We need to create better conditions to address the root causes of migration. This will cost money. We are on it. It will require engagement. It will work. But if you are looking for this thread of the migration diplomacy, that's what brings all these elements together. We need more awareness of the changing migration environment and align it to the instruments that were not designed for this change.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Just let me come back to the pact, of course, that is so crucial for completing the picture and looking forward. So, what is your expectation? We have now heard negotiations with European Parliament seem to come to a result and we could finalize everything. What do you think really can change out of that? Is there, with what we are dealing within the pact, a real chance that something will change on the ground?
Okay, two different things. First, what I expect to happen with the pact from now until we have the final agreement. Since last Wednesday, we have agreement by our member states at the Council on all elements of our proposal. That's in jargon we call common position. For a few months now, the European Parliament has also agreement on the same. So there is nothing left pending to agree. So now we have this, again, sorry for the Brussels speak, it's called interinstitutional trilogue, where Council and Parliament, with the mediation of the Commissioner Honest Borg, they will try to work out their differences. There are some, but not unsurmountable compared to what we started. So I really hope that somehow between the Spanish and the Belgian presidency, we will have formal agreement. Now, at the other level, it is, okay, we have the agreement. how will this work in practice? I'll try to simplify how it will work in practice. For the first time, the pact will give us a regulatory framework which will be firmly grounded in EU law. So it will not be a patchwork of regulatory arrangements like the one we're having now, which we have a bit of this and a bit of that, a bit of Dublin, but a bit of Vienna and a bit of EU laws. All this will be simplified into a set of rules firmly grounded in EU law, financed by EU money, controlled by the EU Commission, and ultimately under the scrutiny of the EU Court of Justice. That's important. Then, in practice, clearly the new element would be the so-called screening procedure. At our external borders, we will have very swift screening procedures for safety, security, health, and likelihood of obtaining asylum or not. This would allow us to very quickly identify who is to be returned and who is likely to obtain asylum, which they will then enter into our burden sharing agreements and solidarity. I hope, but I think it will happen, that we'll have less arrivals under the pact than without the pact, not only with our work with our countries of origin and transit, but also because we will not relive the situation of 2015, 2016, I think. We will have more of a situational crisis that we can manage through the pact. And yes, I mean, how it will work? It will work the same way as a normal EU policy, something we never had in Europe's history.
Coming back, what you mentioned in your speech, these legal pathways to Europe, I think we had the experience in ICMPD talking to our member states that this is one of the most important issues because of lacking workplaces here and there. So what you announced, this tool that should be created for legal pathways, talent tool, I think this is most important. What are we missing at that specific time just to make it happen more easily, I think. This is one of the main issues we also are discussing with our member states.
We didn't want to front-load the discussion on the talent pool in a way that would have coincided with the difficult negotiations on the pact. And I think we were right, frankly. I think we were right to give negotiating space on the pact discussions, and once we have this clear, then separately come with a talent pool. Now, this is also an opportunity to explain a bit more, although it's always risky to do that before the college adopts the formal procedure, but we are in the family here. So the idea would be this match, that we will include in the talent pool not abstract notions of vacancies, but vacancy jobs per sector. So that would allow to match the expertise, the interest from countries of origin and transit, not for the whole world, but for our perimeter, to express an interest. So the moment we'll have this match, we will not issue visas. We do not issue visas in the European Union. This will not be a compulsory system, but it will be a system that will be so attractive for the member state in question that can use the match to do the necessary. So it will be some sort of a plaque tournante, as we say, a roving stone of permanent match. We will also have in the package a proposal, a recommendation to facilitate the recognition of professional qualifications from third-party nationals, because this system would also require some sort of proof So yeah, and with the other legislative proposals which are already on the table, the long-term residence directive, I mean, we're getting to something meaningful, and frankly, I think the time is now for this.
If I may put the last question, you also mentioned sometimes we have been a little bit naive in the past. Are we now tough enough? Do you think so? Are we really on stage using also this power of Europe in our negotiations?
Okay, but if you allow me and the audience, my remark about naivety was not on migration exclusively. We, for many years in Europe, were under a set of illusions. Let me share some with you. First illusion is that it's okay, we have any security problems, the Americans would come and protect us. It's okay not to manufacture masks or respirators. It's okay, we need them, we'll buy them from cheap. It's okay that Taiwan does our microchips. It's okay that Russia sells us cheap energy through fixed pipelines and nothing will happen to us. You know, we are the European Union. It's okay, we give money, we're the biggest donor of development aid, and somehow all this will work out. Well, it didn't. These 4 years in all these areas, the pandemic, the war, the instrumentalization of energy, the hybrid threats, the conclusion is that the world around us is not as simple as we expected it to be. When the whole world was looking for masks and ventilators, we had to go at the back of the queue. And when Russia instrumentalized energy, we understood that for all our pipelines and gas lines, if the one who sells to you is not a contractor but an enemy, then you have to find alternative ways, and so on and so on. So my call, on which I subscribe, and with my work in the Commission I try to project, is we need a Europe which is more alert, less given, less innocent, less naive. It's not, we're not yet there, but I think there is growing awareness that this is the way that we should go about ourselves.
Would be so interesting to ask the Commissioner again some questions, but time is running out. So at this stage, I really would like to thank him, Vice President, being also the troubleshooter of European Union, to be with us. Let's thank him and applaud him for everything he has done. It's a pleasure. Thank you so much.